Okay, it is 6:19. I will call this board meeting to order. If everybody would please stand, remove your hats, and we will say the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joe, do we have a roll call, please? Present.
Bobby Brown. Here. Joe Maddox Nelson. Here. Kristen Matt Miller. Andy Mary. Jenny Pyatt.
Here.
Schreiber. Katie Schrader.
Here.
Catherine Sullivan. Here.
Okay, we have a quorum of the board present. I just want to remind all the board members, when speaking, please speak into the microphone, pull it closer to you so all can hear what you are saying. Item number 2, citizens and delegations. Letter A, student representatives. Mr. Rogers, do you have that report from the students this month?
I expected them to be here actually, but I will check momentarily.
If it's okay with the board, can we just move to the next item while Mr. Rogers is checking? Is that okay with all board members? Okay. Letter B, recognition. I will turn it over to our district superintendent, Mrs. Wojcicki.
Okay, so first tonight, we would like to recognize Mrs. Maxine Schutza for earning her MOPI, which is a Modified Oral Proficiency Interview. The course was through American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages and was on the Modified Oral Proficiency Interview. The OPI is a high-stakes national oral proficiency assessment in which people are rated at the novice, intermediate, advanced, or superior levels of language proficiency. Please come forward, Ms. Schutza, and congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and next we have several people to receive recognition for PBIS Pride Night. On February 9th, our elementary schools and middle school collaboratively hosted Pride Night for our community. This event took a lot of planning and hard work outside of the routine school day. At this time, I would like to recognize the following individuals for working to organize the event: Jolene Keppel, Cora Dobrinska, Courtney Yari, Kathy Zabluski, and Lynn Walters. And also, these two gentlemen helped set up and tear down all of the stations, Jeff Rasmussen and Chris Benishek. And I'm sure I probably didn't pronounce that right. Please come forward to receive your recognition, and we'll get a picture of all of you together. Also, as they come down, I would like to also recognize our staff that worked after school to help support the event. Mandy Mott, Tracy Smith, Amy Stutzring, Courtney Berger, Janet Krittershine, Matt Gates, Elizabeth Harrell, Heather McCann, Heather Besser, Becky Onesti, Dan Bastel, Tammy Molina, Laura Palmer, Emily Sherfinsky, Ashley Darr, Teal Mott, Chris Grant, and Lori Morant. We thank them for their hard work as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rogers just gave me the motion that he does not have a student representative's report. So we would move on to letter C, public comments. Michelle, we didn't have anybody to sign up. Item 3, administration reports. Letter A, Director of Business Office. Mr. Rogers, is the back door open? Locked?
Is it locked?
Thank you. But the records also reflect that Kristen did show up at the time.
All right, so the report that I have this evening is a analysis that was asked by the Finance Committee to present at tonight's meeting, just to analyze the tax levy and then our mill rate and how Fund 46 contributions have impacted taxes. So the overview on the first slide there just talks about capital project funds, Fund 46, and then the difference between the general fund balance. So when you're looking at Fund 46, there's a few differences between the two. Fund 46 is a long-term capital improvement trust fund that a school board can use with an approved long-term capital improvement plan, which is a minimum of 10 years. And then that is establishing a trust transfer from the general fund to Fund 46. And the contribution from Fund 10 to Fund 46 is recorded as an expenditure for shared cost and equalization aid. So simply put, what that means is if a district puts funds into Fund 46, you can accumulate funds from year to year to be used for long-term capital improvements, as well as earn interest. And it counts towards shared cost, which means that you will receive state aid on whatever you transfer that will lessen the amount that taxpayers pay. The general fund balance is, the purpose of that is to generate a fund balance to avoid short-term borrowing for cash flow purposes. I know we talked a little bit about this at budget hearing in October, but in school districts, fund cash flow fluctuates greatly throughout the school year with how our revenues come in. So in order to make payroll and regular expenditures, you want to make sure you have enough in your fund balance to ensure that your cash flow, you have that covered for your cash flow, and you don't have to spend additional interest with the bank to be able to cover things such as payroll. So the key difference here, which I spoke a little bit about, is that when money is added into the Fund 10 fund balance, we lose state aid, which then in turn increases taxes and the mill rate for our local taxpayers. So the next slide, we analyze the actual impact to taxpayers, and I'm going to also talk a little bit with, have our finance chair, Dr. Bardo, talk a little bit about this as he was on the board in the finance committee during these significant changes throughout the last several years.
Fortunately, when I came on the board, been for the 2020-21 year, but I was at the budget hearing in 2019 and 2020. That was the year Jill and I both applied for a seat on the board, and then we decided we would run that spring. When I was at that budget hearing in 2019-2020, about 3 slides in, I saw that the previous business manager had added $902,487.80 to the fund balance. And I turned to the person next to me, and I will clean up what I said, but I said, the taxpayers are going to have a problem. Because I knew that if you didn't spend money and you had a fund balance, it was going to hurt the district taxpayers. Next to that 902,000, you'll see the decreased state aid that this district got in 2019 and 2020. $593,386, and that is what our local taxpayers had to pay in addition to what they would have had to pay because the 900,000 was added to the fund balance. And as we move on, Jill, Danny, and I, JD, Ron, Ward, Andy, Mary, starting in 2021, and fortunately, I knew about 46. And Jake knew about it, and our previous business manager knew about it, but it wasn't being used. So in 2021, the board agreed, and I'm giving credit to the whole board, agreed that we should start using Fund 46. Even so, in 2021, there was still by district added $231,410.10 to the fund balance, which cost the district and taxpayers an additional $56,186. 21-22, they still added $355,655.55, which cost our district taxpayers $244,762. In 2022-2023, they added $343,409.53. That's last year. So in this year's taxes, our taxpayers had to pay an additional $239,047 because the state sees that we don't spend the money, and therefore we get less aid from the state. And so as you can see, in the last 4 school years, $1,800,000+ have been added to the fund balance, which cost our taxpayers $1,133,381 in extra payments. That's a lot of money. Now, Kelly had help from a DPI expert to make sure these numbers are correct. She's worked on this for 2 weeks. I asked her after the last finance committee what I was looking for, and I left for Chicago last week, and we actually finished this up at 2 o'clock this afternoon to present tonight. On the next page, or on the next slide, the next one.
Previous one.
Previous one. Okay. So now we're looking at Fund 46. What have we added so that Jake in the future can do capital projects, such as when 10th Street out here is resurfaced, we can do here at the same time because we have some money in here to do that. So even though they were putting money into the fund balance, during those 3 years, they added $535,000, $750,000, $450,000, which totaled $1,735,000 into Fund 46. And what's nice about Fund 46, our school year budget year ends June 30th. But Fund 46 allows the business manager all the way to July 31st to take money from Fund 10 that would go to the general fund in fund balance and move that money over to Fund 46, where it is in there and we gain interest on it. So, because that money was put in there, in the second part of that slide, it shows if we had not used Fund 46, those 3 years where it says increased aid, that's the difference on the taxpayers in our favor, because on the 535,000 that was put into Fund 46, that was a difference of $73,712 that would have been on the tax, for our people to tax, if that had been, that 535,000 had gone into the fund balance. Next year, 750,000, 271,388 was saved. The 450 this past year saved us another 74,198. And in those 3 years, we've saved the taxpayer by using Fund 46, $419,298 plus, because it's combined, the money is confined in 46 till Jake uses it, we've gained $65,420.79 in interest, for a total of $484,718.79 that taxpayers have gained that they didn't have to pay. So if we take from the previous page where we had to pay extra $1,133,381, our taxpayers did. And then we take the $419,298, which we show that we've saved by putting money into Fund 46. The question becomes, what if I hadn't known about 46? What if the board back 3 years ago would have said, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to let them put it into fund balance. Our taxpayers would have had to pay over 4 years a deficit of $1,552,679 more dollars. So Fund 46 is working for us, and we've saved the district taxpayers money, and at the same time, we've also, because money was put in the last 4 years into fund balance, our taxpayers paid over $1.1 million extra that the state would have given us if we had used all of it in Fund 46.
Can I add to that, Dave, that this Fund 46 actually benefits the district in a tremendous way, in that this capital improvement campaign that we hear so many people in the community say, if our schools would have planned for the future for projects of renovations, we would not be in the situation that we're in today. Fund 46 allows for this to happen because all of the renovation projects, all of the building upkeep can come out of that Fund 46. So this is something that, hindsight's always 20/20, we should have started with the state first offered Fund 46 to school districts.
Danny, I think you were,
Yes, sir.
I think we remember this wrong. I think we established Fund 46 when Brian Mistel was here. We definitely used it before that. Was this the year, was one of these years COVID, or was it the first year that the low revenue limit exemption?
Actually, the first year that we started Fund 46, because
2016.
I was in the room with Tim Prunty, the business manager then, as well as Dave Bardo, whenever he was talking to Tim about this.
In 2016.
That's when the Fund 46 was.
That's when it was established in 2016, but we didn't start utilizing it here until Dr. Bardo came on to the board. We talked about Fund 46, but nothing was established. Can you find any record of establishment on that, Kelly?
So there's a small amount that's been added to establish it, but it wasn't being contributed to.
So you're,
And I can find those
I
numbers.
have vague memories of us having a vote to establish it.
Mhm.
you did, yes.
It was 2019, the year that the state passed the low revenue limit exemption, so we could levy. Did anybody go back and watch that hearing? I guess I maybe would have known Mary and talk about this. Because I remember when you guys were running it, we had that huge tax increase, but I thought we could levy more. you know, we could have levied less, but we had to do that. We didn't have to. We wanted to pay teachers.
I would have to look back and see.
I think that might have been the first year that,
I feel like you're correct on that.
you know, so it might have come so late that I think very easy.
May I ask a question? So Fund 10 on the first page.
Can you move your microphone a little closer, Bobby?
Fund 10 on the first page, where you're getting to the bottom number of 1,133,000, that number over those 4 years. I understand that that number is what's affecting the taxpayer. The next page, using Fund 46 or utilizing Fund 46, allows us the opposite, correct?
Yep, that will
Okay.
increase your state aid,
Right,
lessening your taxes.
right. So one is decreasing state aid and one is increasing state aid.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the net difference between the two. But my question is, why aren't we moving money to Fund 46 at the end of each fiscal year then? So we don't have this remaining big balance in there.
That's the question,
Question.
because
So that's,
my expectation from the beginning is that they would move it all into Fund 46, and it would increase capital availability for Jake, and at the same time, would save money for our taxpayers. And like I said,
When does this happen? Or when would, is it at the end of the fiscal year? Which is June?
and then Kelly will have the opportunity to see what's left in Fund 10 and move it to Fund 46. And that way it'll help our taxpayers and help us as a district, so that a capital project, by putting money in there, lots of schools in the past have had to go to referendum just to keep the buildings up. Well, this is a fund that helps us as we go forward to upkeep what we have.
and part of the piece too about Fund 46 is at the end of the fiscal year, you generally have to pay, you have to spend whatever you have left. So let's just say you have $400,000 left. But let's say our director of building and grounds would have a large project like the window project or something of that nature where it's multiple millions of dollars. If you only operate on your Fund 10 surplus at the end of the year, you're not going to be able to fund large projects and financially plan for the future around bigger projects. You can only do littler things in order to get that aidable state aid. So essentially, that's the biggest piece. And then gaining interest, that's significant as well in Fund 46.
So in Fund 10, just to be clear, we've left the balance remaining.
It's depending on how you're financially planning. So if you're financially planning for a surplus because you have capital improvements that are in your long-term plan, then it's not too much, depending on what but if you are planning on putting that into your fund balance and you're well above covering your cash flow, then you're losing state aid. Because generally the purpose of your Fund 10 fund balance is so that you can cover payroll and those pieces during those influx times of when revenues are coming in.
Can you move money out of 46 back to 10?
No,
Can you draw from 46 at any time?
yes,
After 5 years.
which the 5 years we are
But that's
surpassing.
capital.
But it has to be for
Mhm. But every district has, window upgrades or
Right.
parking lot, whatever's on your 10-year capital improvement plan. And you can find that 10-year capital improvement plan in the budget that we had in October. But obviously that is always being updated with the director of building and grounds to look at where our facilities are at and those types of things. But every district is going to have capital improvements that they need to make for their aging buildings. Nina, I believe, was presenting on how they strategically used Fund 46 to do a lot of district improvements and things like that as well. So there are other districts that are using this as a financial planning strategy that has impacted their taxpayers and their district significantly.
So in the balance, looking at Fund 10 again, that's up to the finance director, I would assume, or the board, to really narrow in on projecting where we want to be at the end of each fiscal year.
Yes, and we do work with financial planners, like Dr. Bardo had talked about. We worked with them on this report as well as the Department of Instruction. There's lots of pieces, and I won't get too deeply into it, but even when you look at the decreased aid of the significantly lower, the 56,000, there's also pieces of looking at, and I won't get too into it. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but there's so many layers, like looking at your secondary and your tertiary ceilings and things of how much you get reimbursed. So it's very important to be really strategic, work with the Department of Instruction, work with your financial forecasting consultants and things like that to be using all of these strategies together to ensure that you are making the best choices as to how much you're spending, how much you're transferring to 46, how much all of these things impact mill rates. And every district's in a different boat with debt and things like that, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next couple of slides, but all those pieces together are really important to work together. Thank you.
I think it's important to note that, you know, based off of our property taxes, because I know everybody was shocked when they got that this year. A lot of it has to do with when, you know, the city and the county go through and reassess values. You know, I don't know if it's every year, every 3 years, every 5 years, I don't know, but like,
That's coming in the
so,
But you're right.
yeah, I mean, that really has a huge impact, so my taxes, but now, you know, for this year, the mill rate goes up, and, you know, that's why we got to so hard.
Yes,
It was not just the school district.
right,
So I
exactly.
just want to make sure it's very clear. I will say that, scream it from the rooftops, it's not just the school district.
Yes, yes, we have no control over reassessing properties, so if your property value goes up, you are paying that mill rate on the additional value that your property has
Let's go to
gained.
mill rate.
Mhm.
It's probably time.
Hold 1 second.
Just, I want to share my appreciation for bringing this to the board. I referenced, as just one board member, the need for strategic planning, for a board in our district, because a strategic plan drives decision-making. We currently have several buildings that we have to maintain. We have a capital improvement fund that we really probably had zero intention of really doing anything with, up until more recently. So I'm excited about this because it helps the board work with the business office, and most importantly, with the community of where our district wants to go, and strategically planning in all aspects, including financial planning. So we know why we're making the decisions we are based on the strategic plan. So I'm excited to pivot with the positive momentum and continuing it forward. So thank you for bringing this and sharing it.
You know, one piece that you bring up is strategically looking at all of your funds to be able to support large projects or support the financial future of your district. And one great example of that is by using Fund 46 these last 3 years and depositing money into them, gaining interest, we were able to couple ESSER funds with Fund 46 to be able to fund a multi-million-dollar project. Where in some districts, when you aren't utilizing Fund 46 or aren't working together as a superintendent, curriculum director, buildings and grounds, and special ed director, you sometimes use those funds in silos. Whereas we knew that this was part of long-term district planning, so we were able to couple those one-time federal grants, grants that we're going to be applying for, as well as using Fund 46. And without Fund 46, we wouldn't have had to be able to do that. And potentially, in the future, have to go to operational referendums to be able to do these things that you can strategically save for and use with other grants. So That's been pivotal with that. The next slide just has a little bit more detail that you can read on your own. And then the slide after that is just saying how does all of this fit into the mill rate? How does this impact my taxes? So on the left side, where it starts with 2011 through 2021, that is the mill rate before Fund 46 was starting to really be utilized and large chunks were being put in. So as you can see, that went from about $9.23 to the lowest point of $7.26. If you look to the right, where it starts with 2021 and goes to 2024, you can see that those are the lowest three that we've had in the last 13 years. And those are all impacted by what that Fund 46 deposit was, as well as paying off debt. So you'll see a pretty large drop from 21-22 school year to the 22-23 school year. That was where that debt was paid off and impacted the mill rate. And you will see a increase of the $5 to $6.21. $6.21 is what our mill rate is currently. And if you go to the next slide, this is what Angie was talking about as to, why was there such a large increase if we were in fact utilizing Fund 46. Fund 10, there was also still a deposit in, so if we would have put all of that in, that would have lowered it. But the other piece is that we've talked about it, the state budget actually increased the low revenue ceiling of $10,000 to $11,000. So that is a big increase that came to the district, which impacted our mill rate, as well as what Angie had referenced, and that's that equalized valuation. So when your property value is higher, you're obviously going to be paying more because the mill rate's not increasing, but your value is, so you're paying more per thousand. And to note that this current year, this current mill rate for the taxes that just came out is still the second lowest mill rate in 13 years.
Kelly, do you remember how much the equalized value for the district went up?
I don't, but I can, that number should be in the budget book.
Was it a billion? I mean, was it a billion?
It was significant.
It was like 1.3 billion.
I can look, I don't want
Yeah.
to say any numbers without looking at it, but
That's the big equalized value.
yes.
Which, and the way to look at it is that if your property went up $10,000 and the mill rate went up is 6.21, that's new valuation. And so you're paying $1.21 increase before, let's say it's a house of 100,000, okay? And it goes to 110. 100,000, you're paying $1.21 on the first 100,000. That's the increase. You get reassessed, and it goes up 10,000. That's 6.21 on 10,000. That's why your taxes go crazy if you're reevaluated.
So the last slide that I have is just a little bit of a comparison when you look at the impact of using Fund 46 versus not. So on the left, you'll see that the average mill rate was $8.33 before Fund 46. The highest, again, was $9.23. And then the lowest was $7.26 before Fund 46. After Fund 46, the average is $5.98, which is a decrease of $2.35. The highest, going down from $9.23 to $6.75, is a difference of $2.48. And then the lowest, again, this is where that debt dropped off, in addition to the Fund 46 transfer. That's where you have, before Fund 46 was $7.26 down to $5 after the use, which is a difference of $2.26. So pretty significant differences for our taxpayers by just utilizing that strategy. And I'm just not going to read all the asterisks because we've already addressed them. I just wanted to make sure that we touched on avoiding frequent operational referendums, which a lot of our neighboring districts are going through. So it's just, again, thinking strategic and thinking as the district as a whole over the next several decades and how we can plan now for the future with, obviously, our main objective is student impact and student achievement and student well-being, as well as our taxpayers and making sure that we're fiscally responsible with our funds so that we can do the best that we possibly can to be stewards of our taxpayers' money.
Kelly, thank you for doing this for not only the board, but for the taxpayers of the district.
I concur that, Kelly, thanks so much, and Dr. Bartle, thank you for leading that too from the Finance Committee. Letter B, Director of Pupil, first, were there any other questions from board members? Okay, letter B, Director of Pupil Services and Special Education.
The report is attached. Do any of you have questions?
How often do the guidelines change or whatever, the 53-page document? Is it really different from 5 years ago, or do they?
What document are you referring to, JD?
In the audit?
In Colleen's report?
Yeah.
Mrs. Burkon?
Okay, that's a great question. So if you come to
Can you-
Thank you so much.
So let me get to, so you're asking about the document that gives us suggestions for our self-evaluation. So what happens is every 5 years, you are on a cycle across the state of Wisconsin where your IEPs will get pulled. And the state pulls a particular percentage. And that information goes from the state to the federal. And it comes back to informed decisions of changes they want. So there might be 40 pages one year. There might be 50 the next. There might be 53. I don't have a historical accuracy about what it is because it's really based on the current IEPs that are pulled and then sent to the feds. So it could fluctuate. When talking to the directors group and different professional organizations I'm a part of, it is usually close to the 45 to 55 pages. Because there's always just a little bit of something. A little bit of something might be the way we used to explain data at a present level of how a student is performing. We may find out that the data may not be as maybe user-friendly to a parent or other groups. So now they want us to really pay more attention to not just including data, which might be FastBridge data internally in a number. They want to know, how is this child performing in relationship to other grade level peers of where a student in that grade level should be, not where they are in your school, but nationally. You know, if we're looking at someone and we're looking at 5th grade standards, where is Colleen performing if I'm a student in that present level? So then we have a clear trajectory of how we get the students there. Reading drives accountability is a push to make sure that our kids can read at grade level. So even in our IEPs, we really want to lay that out clearly. What does that look like and sound like? So I can't give you an accurate answer because there isn't really a real accurate answer.
But so, was there a 50-page document from the state last year saying, last year, try to do these things different in IEPs? Like, is this 50 pages specific to our district based on what
This comes to all the districts that are on that cycle. So we happen to be on that cycle this year. So we're not on that cycle every year.
So you don't get the document unless you're on the cycle?
It's available, but I didn't go back and look at all the previous years. And it's only available for several years on DPI. So you can go look. I don't know off the top of my head, JD, like how many pages it is each year.
Okay, I was just curious, like, how teachers are supposed to know. Like, are they just, when they...
That's a great question. You get that document shared with you when you're on that cycle. That's a great question. So several years from now, when we're on it again, they'll give it to all the schools. They'll post it on a spot in DPI that's not really easy to find unless you're on that self-assessment cycle. then you're gonna bookmark it because it's not easy to find, and that's what you're gonna use to try and, use for corrective. The other piece that I had added onto our agenda tonight is really about all the hard work. And yes, IEPs are part of our case manager's job, but this is just one example of, in 3, 4, 5 years, it may not be 53 pages, it may be 58 pages, it may be 52 pages. So some of those pieces change, and it really is dependent on what the federal government, because special education has that federal ties to it, right? So upon what they decide to push back to the state to say this is what needs to change.
So is every student who has an IEP get a new one every year, or do they last multiple years? I guess I
So
never
that's a
thought
great
of it.
question. So you want an initial, you get an initial every year, and you get re-evals every 3 years. Yep, those are processes that we don't get to choose, but we need to follow. So that's a great question. So every year, if you're a student with an IEP, and sometimes students are released from their IEP, they've met their goals, and there's no longer need for special education services.
So theoretically, we should find this document every year, and it's sort of like a guidelines change on how we're supposed to write these. I don't know if they're big things or small things or.
Some are big, like some of the changes we're seeing right now are really big changes. So looking at like the first piece that I described to you, being able to connect how a student is doing in relationship to grade level standards not only requires the case manager to know that, but it requires time, professional training, and collaboration with grade level peers and grade level teachers. Because there's a lot more skin that they have in the game now, according to our new self-assessment cycle.
So the case manager is always a special education teacher, or it's a,
Yes.
and how many kids does each special education teacher have?
It varies. We have some of our speech and caseloads extremely high, well into 20, 30, 40, 50 kids. Most of our case managers are anywhere right now, as I look today, actually, we were talking about this, anywhere from elementary to middle to high school, anywhere from 14 to 20 kids on a caseload. And it's more than just number, it's the disability and the disability-related needs and the disability-related services. It's a great question. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Burkhoff. We'll move on to letter C, Director of Curriculum and Instruction. You have the attachment there.
Good evening, everyone. So we're going to start with our district monitoring report and then go into each school talking about their own data. So you're going to see the district data monitoring report up. This is around FastBridge. So just as a reminder, FastBridge is our benchmark screener that we do here in Antigo. Many other districts use it, but it is a localized screener that we have chosen to help support our instruction and our data-driven decisions around our students. So it's an important time of year after our winter benchmarks. We do it in fall, winter, and then again in spring. So we took our winter benchmark when we came back in January from our winter break. Then we look at all of our data and then decide next steps for our students. So looking at the data, and Mr. Rinsing, if you want to bring it down to where it says winter 2023, you can scroll a few pages. We're going to be very honest about our data tonight. So I want to preface that so that people aren't like taken aback by what we're talking about, but it's important to say where we are. And that's really important because as you look at the percentages of students who are passing and the students who are not proficient, every number is a child. So that's why we are very passionate about these numbers and passionate about what we talk about in data, because we're very understanding that every data point is a child that walks through our doors. And what we never want to tell a parent is that we are failing their kids. And right now we are. So when you look at the data, so this is our winter FastBridge data. And our foundational skills at the 4K, K, and first grade levels are incredibly important because they lay the foundation of our students becoming readers in the upper grades. We always talk about learn to read by third grade, and then after that we read to learn. We use all of our reading skills to read social studies and science, but if we don't have those foundational skills at those primary levels, we really set our students up to struggle in those upper grades. So you'll see on the left-hand side under grade level, you'll see 4K and kindergarten have early reading underneath. Early reading is a different subset of tests that we give our lowest or our youngest readers because those are our foundational skills. So we talked about this at committee around those skills that we test our students on, letter sounds, letter names, being able to blend words. We call them nonsense words, which means nonsense words that are not real words, but that we can blend those sounds to make nonsense words so that our students are starting that precursor to our reading abilities. So if your students can't blend, they won't be able to read. So that's why the nonsense words are incredibly important because it sets us up for success in reading as we hit first grade, second grade, and on. You'll see a new column on the district and each school's graph, which is percentage of student growth. That doesn't mean we're saying we're celebrating growth. We celebrate growth with our students. So when they grow, we chart it. A lot of our students have chart. We get to celebrate with them. And we always say as adults, we know where our proficiency lines are. Because I'm really excited for a student who grows from the 1st percentile nationally to the 6th percentile. But as an adult, I know that that 6th percentile is not great and we don't want our students to sit there, if that makes sense. So when you look at our data, we have a percentage of student growth. That's just from grade levels from fall to winter. So you'll see in 4K, they went up 6%, which means we're failing 30% of our students in 4K right now. That's exciting because we're passing 70% of our students, except if your student is in that 30%. And that's why we're talking very clearly about our data, so that you guys have an understanding, and the community does, of what we're working on in the past 4 months, how we're moving forward in the next months till spring assessments, and the trajectory that we want our students on. Ms. Schreiber.
Do we have any kind of relationships, like working relationships with our local daycares? That means either in-home or daycare centers. Because they're the ones that are spending a lot of time with our youth before they come to okay, and they have those the knowledge on how to teach early reading like that. I feel that would help. I foresee that helping us a lot.
Yes, what we see, and I know people want to say trauma and homeless and things like that, what we see is our students come in a lot more proficient than what we think they do. So our students are coming into 4K a lot more proficient than the other grade levels. Yes, we do need to reach out to families because as a parent, you should not know how to teach phonics. That's not a skill set you learn anywhere, but it's important that we help our parents learn more about phonics skills and how to help with like phonemic awareness and phonological awareness at a younger age, because we know birth to 3 is very important on those concepts of print and that pre-reading skills. And we talked about that through our title at Family Engagement Nights. How do we help prepare families to help prepare their students to read? So yes, on that. Also, we don't expect teachers or parents to know how to do all that either. Any other questions?
What's on grade level for a 4K kid?
So the subsets that we do for 4K, so it's concepts of print, which means our students get tested, they sit right next to you, and they should be able to, you have a piece of paper that has no writing on the top, and they should be able to flip it over and maneuver that paper so they know it goes left to right for the sentence, right? Like you open a book, those are concepts of print. They should be able to point to a word. They should be able to point to a letter. They should know where the sentence starts. Not that they can read the sentence, but they should know we start left to right, which is why we want our parents to be reading to our students and moving your finger along those lines. Those are the first precursors to like developmentally literacy.
So you don't expect them to know all the letter names?
So then it's letter sounds and letter names. Yep,
So
in
on
4K.
grade level in 4K, they
Yep.
know all of the letter sounds?
They should know the majority of them, yes, walking out of 4K into kindergarten. They have on the test like a place where you can stop. We decided that we're going to do all of them here in Antigo just because it's important that they walk into kindergarten with their letter sounds and their letter names. Because what we want to do, and we even have 4K students now, and as the elementary principals talk, we have looked at all of our 4K data, and we have some significantly high readers already. So we don't want those kids to just sit there. So we have actually implemented skill groups in our 4K system, where our students who are higher are actually working on blending words and using reading horizons at a kindergarten level because they are high, they know their letters, they know their sounds, they're ready to move on. We have other students that we're really targeting because they're missing some of their letter sounds, and we're targeting those pieces for them as well. So all students are getting what they need at that level, including all the grade levels of the elementary. So that early reading goes into like kindergarten is it's letter sounds, letter names again, and they add nonsense words, that's the blending portion. And that we're adding sight words, so like the words that don't fit with the phonics skill set that they can do, like when, the word the, that they just have to know by sight. And then in first grade, they up their sight words in winter. So kindergarten and first grade, you actually see a different subtest in winter, which is why some of the data looks like how it does in those grades, because we up our sight words in first grade and we add CBM, which is the fluency. They actually in winter should be reading paragraphs. And some of our students aren't there yet, but we're gonna get them there by spring. So those are those foundational skills that we really want to make sure all of our students who leave first grade have the concepts of print. They can blend their nonsense words. They know sight words. They are able to start reading in first grade and reading those decodable texts of using all those phonics pieces. As they get to second grade and they take the A reading, that is where they walk into vocabulary, comprehension, and then fluency. So those foundational skills, that 4K, K, and 1 are those really strong grade levels that we need those foundational skills. Because if I walk into second grade and I don't know how to blend words, that becomes very tough to sit in a classroom as the teacher expects me to read, and I'm still learning my letters and my sounds. And we do have students who are still there. So we had to make sure we looked at our data, made some decisions. We sat down at every elementary school, looked through every child's data, created new groups, pinpointing and targeting what they need exactly, and have them progress monitor, which means every week we're looking at their data, we're giving them a quick assessment on FastBridge, making sure we're looking at those trend lines that our students are making growth. If they're not making growth, changing that decision to a different intervention.
Are we asking parents to help practice at home?
Yes. So we're focusing around first grade right now because our students, you look at the score and it says 73% below. That doesn't feel good to anyone. What our first grade teachers know though is that they, on the assessment in winter, really upped the amount of sight words that they need. So we are putting in sight words everywhere. You will see them in the hallways. You will see the lunch nutrition people providing sight words. They're doing them in Phy Ed class. In our class, we are hitting them hard on sight words because between now and spring, they can blend. They worked on all their nonsense words. They are right there. Now we're going to do decodable readers and sight words. So by spring, we expect to come back and stand in front of you without that 73%.
You mentioned looking at trend lines weekly?
Yeah. So our tier 3 groups, which are our groups that need the most targeted support, they're the furthest away of proficiency. They do it weekly along with our tier 2 groups, which are, we call them yellow just because we need a name for them, but are like, they're not so far away, but they're still not making proficiency. We do them as well so that we're always making sure, and we actually progress monitor our proficient kids and our advanced kids because we don't want them to start sinking down. So we want to make sure that their fluency is going up. So not all districts do that. The great staff in Antigo has decided to put in that work because we want to make sure just because I'm green on the test and I'm proficient doesn't mean I don't slide below that proficiency line real quick if I don't have the solidification of those skills yet. So we want to make sure we're keeping a track on every student that walks through our doors and making sure that we're pushing them to where they need to be.
How many letters a week do they learn in 4K?
In 4K, I mean, there's not a set apart. I know in kindergarten, their first week, they learn 3, and then they add on to those 3 letters. They're using reading horizons as well, so that's introducing the letters at the kindergarten level. They introduce them through their dialectic conversations that they have and their morning work and things like that that are set up. But they should know all their letters by the end.
So theoretically, you have to do enough letters every week
Yes.
to get through them all?
Yep. Some go together more, like there's some that are students know a little bit more, like A. Right? They can see those a little bit better, or they'll know their first letter of their name as they work on that. So, however, we need to get them to the end of the year to know their letters. Is the goal. Okay. So this is the data you will see. Other than 4K, we're hovering around like 4K and first are kind of our outliers, but we're hovering around that 50% mark, 46 to 57, kind of in that range. It's not where we want to be. So from fall to winter, we did make a lot of gains on those skill set, and you'll hear the principals talk about that. And they'll show you their data from their school because we really had to go back because in fall, when I talked to you about we're missing a lot of phonics skills, we're missing a lot of these skills, we had to catch a lot of students up. So it doesn't feel good that we're not over that proficiency line, but if you look and dive deep into the data, you're going to see that they've made increases towards that proficiency line. And now as we move to spring, we have other action steps in place to get them over. Is this a one-year thing? Can I come in spring and say 100% of our kids are passing? I'm going to say no, but that's always the goal. But we are on the right track of what we're providing for our students to keep moving in that direction more than we were. And the teachers are putting in that work. So this is where we are in A reading, and if you scroll down, Mr. Racine, to the next chart for A math, you're gonna see a little bit more celebration around our math scores, especially at the elementary level and the middle level. We're seeing a lot of growth around our math skills and our math standards. And you'll see early math under 4K and kindergarten as well. Those are subsets of numbers, making sure they know how to subitize, making sure they know how to identify their numbers, use their numbers, be able to count, and some of those skills. Any questions around that?
The reading law,
Yeah, Act 20.
council approved for curriculum. Ours wasn't on it, but today DPI approved another 7, so now it's going to the legislature.
Yeah.
Have you thought much if ours doesn't make the final cut? What our
Yeah.
thoughts are gonna be? Are we gonna keep trying this? Are we gonna find something new? Are we gonna?
So I don't know yet. That just came out as of like a day ago. And the staff doesn't know that yet. So we're gonna talk to them at the elementary level on Wednesday, or if they watch this video. So interreading did not make the list as of right now for Act 20. So Act 20 is the bill that came through the reading law in Wisconsin. And what it did is there's 9 components for reading instruction, and they have a rubric that they looked at all curriculum resources and by that rubric, based on those 9 components. Interreading went through one cycle, and then it went through another cycle along with some other curriculum resources. And it was established on the 14th, I believe, of February, that it was not considered in the 2024 list. Now, what that means is there going to be another list? Is there going to be another round? We don't know, but sitting at this moment right here in time, it did not pass along with a few other resources. There were 3, I believe, that were passed right away through, and I can get you those names if you have any, want to investigate further. But right now we're sitting with the resource that did not pass that Act 20 bill. Next steps, we're not sure. I will say though that because of the implementation of Reading Horizons for Phonics, and Haggerty around phonemic awareness, and Read Live around fluency and comprehension, we have what I call filled the holes and the gaps in that resource. So when I came in, I looked at the rubric and our interreading, and I was looking to see where our gaps would lie. And that's the reason we put in a lot of these pieces, because a lot of other school districts that had a curriculum, it might say, yes, like Wit and Wisdom passed, but you have to also add geodes and another resource to supplant that phonics instruction. So we have done those pieces already. The staff doesn't really know why we did that, but it was in hopes that if interreading did not pass, we have all the components that our students need. What you'll notice in the data as well is that every implementation year for a new resource, you should see a huge dip in your winter data. We did not see that. And so that's a huge credit and a celebration that our scores did not dip as far as they normally would when you implement a new resource, because of the hard work and those other resources that we put in place. Which is exciting, because if you don't go down as far, you don't have as far a hole to dig out of come spring. So we're hoping that we kept that trajectory on a really good plane, and that we can increase, because you'll see the most growth in your students at the elementary, especially from winter to spring. So that is traditionally how Fastbridge, where you see that growth. And like your first graders especially, something just clicks around February, March. We're hoping it clicks now, and that our students become readers, and you see that big increase come spring. We have some other things that I know that different schools are going to speak about, things that they're trying with our students. We're doing a few boot camps, super close to proficiency, to throw them over, because we know they're right there ready to be full readers, and how do we get them over that line. So more to come on Act 20. I'll let you guys know.
I think the DPI the Wisconsin Dyslexia Association was mad at DPI today because they pushed the other 7 programs out of the list.
Yep. It's very contentious right now in the legislation because of this, and curriculum resources, organizations and companies are very upset by what they're doing. So how that plays out, that is above my pay grade. I don't know. I don't work for them. But it'll be interesting to see. So it gets brought to the Joint Finance Committee through the legislation, and everything has to be solidified before March 1st is what I heard. So that means what the reading plan is going to look like, what the screener is gonna be, what's the diagnostic screener that you have to do 10 days after the first screener, and then write that reading plan. Right now, it's kind of all up in the air, but by March 1st, hopefully we'll have some like definite ideas, and I can bring it back to the committee in March once they have, the Joint Finance Committee has made their final decisions. So cross your fingers. Any other questions on the district before I have the principals come up? Okay, oh, I'm gonna start with East. Mr. Zamzo isn't here. So, Mr. Racine, if you bring up East, you'll see the data looks very similar to what the district data looked like. So I know East spent a lot of time working on what's next steps for our students, identifying those skill groups in 4K, making sure that we're being more accountable. So making sure that all students are, or all teachers are using Read Live, all teachers are using Reading Horizons, and making sure that we're really identifying that. And if you want to scroll down to winter again, that would be fabulous. Thank you, sir. So you'll see kindergarten is obviously the outlier right now at East. We do have some ideas of why that is. Again, this isn't teachers, this is system and resource, right? That's what we're looking at. We expect, based on what we know about that data, to come back in spring with it not looking like that in kindergarten. And then if you want to scroll down to math, again, you'll see at the elementary level, great progress in math in all different grades. So like first grade there, we jumped up 31% from fall, which is a huge gain. Any questions on East data? All right, we will go on to North with Ms. Smith.
Justin, can you actually scroll down to the math winter? We're gonna start with math because it is a celebration. All right. So as you can see, our math data, as you saw in East, all of our math data in our groups did increase. So we have less students that are below grade level, all of our grade levels for math. In the fall, we had 60% of our students that were below grade level in 4K through 3rd. We're currently at 46 across North Elementary. Some of the things that we are implementing for math, again, we're utilizing Monster Math as a new supplemental resource to support math in 4K. Dreambox, we're continuing to utilize Dreambox for math, as well as number strings, and number talks. We're doing a lot of those type of interventions for math, again, at the tier 1, as well as tier 2 and tier 3. If you want to go back up to reading now. Thank you. All right, so reading has more that I wanted to talk about. As you'll notice, we don't have as good of data in reading as we did in math. There are several reasons why we're seeing this decline. I'm not here to make any excuses, but they are things that we need to discuss. One thing, we lost a 2nd grade teacher in November, which then affected our interventionist schedules. We actually lost one full interventionist because 2 of our interventionists share that 2nd grade classroom now. So one teaches in the morning and the other teaches in the afternoon. So again, you know, it did affect our staffing, which then affected our tier 2 and tier 3 grouping. The amount of students in tier 2 and tier 3 for behavior has also increased. This has affected our ability to have instructional assistants supporting WIN. So we've had to pull out our instructional assistants in supporting WIN classes so that they can support behaviors. We weren't ensuring that all 2nd and 3rd grade students were utilizing Read Live. Now we have explicitly built in time to utilize that resource tool, and students are reading more than they were in the fall.
What's Read Live exactly?
So, as Ms. Substream explained, that is our fluency, like a resource, it's an online program for fluency and comprehension. So our students they actually have a cold read, a hot read, they read with a teacher, they answer comprehension questions, they actually have to write about the reading, and that is a program that all of our students are utilizing in second and third grade. Another thing that we have established for 4K is skill groups, as Ms. Dutstream described, not just for our students that are struggling, but also to push our higher students in specific areas. Ms. Dutstream explained that our 4K students are also utilizing the Reading Horizons at kindergarten level for our higher students to help push them to now start reading as well. Some of our additional strategies of support that we are utilizing, coaching. So we are blessed to be able to have coaches for all 4K through third grade. Last year, we only really had internal coaching for 4K. From my point of view, it has been very impactful to have all teachers receiving coaching cycles from our internal coaches. Also, we have our internal coaches who facilitate our PLC meetings, which also have been a successful step forward in increasing achievement. We look at weekly formative assessment data as well as our summative data, and then we're able to adjust instruction based on the results. We'll continue to utilize all of those resources to help increase achievement. Another noticing that I noticed was that our subgroup data, such as students with IEPs, has actually shown better growth from fall to winter than we've seen in the past. So that is a celebration. When looking at our first grade data, first grade students actually take the A reading and A math as well as the early reading and early math assessments. When looking at the results, we are seeing that there are more students that are above grade level utilizing the early reading assessments or early math assessments, as those are the foundational skills. And what we also know is that we have to be more intentional about the work on our foundational skills through Reading Horizons. And we now need to move forward with the sight words, as Ms. Dutstream had explained, because we're really looking at results across the nation, and that's where our first grade students really need to be. So with all of that, where we're going, again, is to continue to support our students with our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports. Our students are showing growth, being able to decode words, but as I mentioned, we really need to continue to push them for more sight words. We need to show more progress reading sight words in our students so that they are aligned across the nation. Down a little further in the action steps, I went over some of the things in kindergarten. One of the things that we are utilizing as an additional supplemental support is we're starting each lesson with 5 to 10 minutes of sight word practice. So again, just putting more emphasis on sight words than we did in the past. And I know JD, you also asked about home. So yes, that's another area that we're trying to connect that school and home and the sight words that the students are working on, as well as Ms. Dutstream explained, trying to really have them sprinkled throughout all of our contents. First grade, one of the things that we are continuing to do is obviously utilizing our Reading Horizons during WIN. Another addition is utilizing sentence ladders to help build daily routines for how to build sentences, because if our students, they're starting at words and then they need to build sentences so that they can make more sentences, we really need to have more of a system for that, and so that's really where we're going. Starting WIN with 10 to 15 minutes of sight words. So again, not just at kindergarten, we're doing this at first grade, and then you'll see that moving forward into second and third grade as well. We've actually made an adjustment to our quiet time. So with responsive classrooms, quiet time is one of the strategies that are implemented as part of responsive classrooms. And sometimes classrooms have different opportunities or activities that they can utilize during quiet time. Some could have been even coloring and such, and we really needed to move past that. We need to have our students reading more. So first grade, one of the things that they're doing is partner reading, individual reading, interactive read alouds,
utilizing decodable books, setting goals, and then pulling small groups to read to the teacher. So again, trying to utilize every minute in the day to, increase our achievement. As you'll notice, there's more action items for second and third grade. We again adjusted quiet time for second and third grade. They're actually utilizing that read live. So as I mentioned earlier, we didn't explicitly build that into the schedule. So now after our winter data, we have explicitly built that in replacing the quiet time. It's still a quiet activity, but now all the students are utilizing read live during that time. As well as continuing to utilize more decodable readers, even at the third grade. Because as Ms. Sudstream explained, we do have students, even in the third grade, that are still not proficient in all of their letter names and sounds. Questions?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. You can click on my little bookmark up there. I got sick of scrolling, so there you go. All right, so this is West Elementary. Back in the day, remember when you used to be able to rewind and hit play again? You can kind of rewind and remember everything that Ms. Stutrim said and Ms. Smith said. We did a lot of the same things. Some of the trends are very similar. In ELA, we're able to celebrate, we grew by 4%, and then in math, we grew by 14%. 14 or 12%, excuse me. And we are very excited about the growth, but what is so awesome about our staff is we want 100%. Everybody continues to work harder, and this is just not good enough for everybody. So at West, it's just been very encouraging to see everybody do anything and everything we can to improve students. Some things that we did that were not discussed already. Every morning we have 3 entrances, and we have a vocabulary word for each grade level, and students have a password to get into school. So the second they come in, we're reading. At lunch, we have sight words laid out for students. I have helpers that pass them out and collect them. We also do sight words at our morning meeting when we're exiting. So we've really tried to be super intentional about every move that we've made and every minute that we have at school. One thing that our first grade team did is we have that boot camp from 8:30 to 9:30. Ms. Bartnick has about 7 kids, and they just drill. And believe it or not, she makes it super fun, and kids want to be there. They're seeing success, they're learning, and then they also get ELA later in the day. So kind of like a double dose. The only difference that I'd like to share is with kindergarten. We have both of our kindergarten teachers in WIN time. Remember, WIN is what I need. So both of our kindergarten teachers are in one classroom. I call it the powerhouse, and they are rotating and giving interventions during that time. So students are getting double the amount of interventions with 2 classroom certified teachers, and that has been going very well. Any questions you have of the information on the board? And to JD's point with the sight words, we have a couple slide decks that we made at school that all of our staff uses, and then we've also put them on Class Dojo, and I put them in my West Weekly for the families to review. So that's been a recent push that we're trying.
I saw you guys doing it on Facebook and district book page.
That is it. All right, thank you for your time.
Is the FastBridge sight words, do they give you the list, or is it just like a?
Yes. So the things that we are currently focusing on are the inter-reading sight words. However, there is a crosswalk, and we have those starred so staff members know they are sight word in our upcoming assessment, and then also in inter-reading. And now I will introduce our middle school team.
Okay, we're going to head to the middle school report. Teal and I are going to take turns. Pretty much everything that everybody has said as well. We know at the middle school, we definitely have 2 implemented. We have a couple different implementation. We've got the into reading for 4th and 5th grade. We also have my perspectives for 6th and 7th grade. We didn't see a huge dip, as Ms. Strutstrom has said, but that is still something that we need to continue to work on, make sure that we're digging into those resources. Besides the ELA resources, we did not use Reading Horizons or Read Live last year. Our title teachers were fluent within the Reading Horizons, but at 4th grade level and 5th grade level, we weren't using those, so we're implementing that as well. And what we found at this mid-mark, that we, as the adults, we needed to do more checking in, reviewed our progress monitoring, making sure that we're doing that intentionally. So those are things that we've already set into place during the second semester, during this midterm. So we revised our interventions. We recognized that we weren't targeting and maybe progress monitoring exactly the way we needed to during this first semester. So that has been a learning curve for all of us with our coaches. And then just sitting down together and really learning from each other. So having those intentional check-ins with the adults so that we can help all of our staff, our students with IEPs, students that don't have IEPs, everybody much more intentional and aligned. We did add some test prep for our 6th and 7th grade.
Is it really,
Yep.
maybe this is a question for Glenda or Andy, but is it really hard to just start Reading Horizons in 4th or 5th grade when you didn't have all that experience marking? It seems like it'd be difficult to me. I remember the rules, but yeah.
They review the rules.
So they start from the basics of marking the words, and so that helps them learn like how to say every word so they can decode every word. So it's especially, it works well for all students, students with IEPs, students without IEPs, students who are English learners, because once you know the marking and the racetrack around the word and how to mark that silent E, you can then utilize that in anything you read. So the markings aren't that hard to learn. So once you learn the markings, then you're off to the races on all the words because you can start decoding and finding those, the short vowel. You mark all your vowels, you go around, you mark your E, the silent E, you mark your consonants. And so once you learn those patterns, now I can use those patterns on any word I get to, and on those multisyllabic words too, which will be good for middle school, because what we find is that when students get to those multisyllabic words, they get stuck, because they learn how to like cope through reading in the elementary, but now I'm hitting science words that have so many syllables, and if I can't chunk out those phonics pieces, that's where my fluency we see it dip again.
Yeah, so a big part of the Reading Horizons was our teachers working together. There was a lot of collaboration, just walking in, like they're all like, well, we didn't know all this information, and they just feel like they've gained a lot of knowledge too. So no matter what's coming in, they feel much more equipped than they did previously. Added Read Live, again, that was another resource intervention that we were not using, and we are going to be looking at more intentional for some of our other aspects, not just interventions, but just really trying to be much more intentional with the time that we have with our students. We have to note that in 7th grade, we had a lot of new teachers in 7th grade. So that's something that we really need to reflect on and think about the teacher efficacy and what we're going to be able to do to help all of our students. So that was one area that we're already tweaking. We do have coach available, Jamie Kirsch. She's doing the best she can, and we're all jumping in and trying to do everything. But that is an area that it is something that we do need to know. Who are our veteran staff? Who are our staff that are new? How are we going to implement that? And universally, we're adding, like they had talked about elementary, the partner reading, and we're doing that in ELA. The goal is to do it in every content. We haven't got there yet, but that is something that we do need to do. We notice that is something that many schools do already, and it doesn't take long. Our 5th grade, they added it in right after one meeting, and it's pretty simple. Just like everything that everybody's talked about, we sometimes feel that our kids can't do something, but that is not true. You set up the routine, you set up the system, and they can do it. They really can. So it's really exciting to see all the new and different things. And then last, with what I'll talk about, is goal setting. Just recently, we've always had some goal setting, but again, not really intentional. So we'll go into FastBridge, we'll do the progress monitoring. So now we're having graphs for our students, and they're marking the graphs, and they're seeing how they're either increasing or from week to week if they're seeing a dip. And those conversations are much more rich, and that's 4th through 7th grade. And then moving into our math, Tela's gonna talk about
I got it.
that. Yes.
Rudely interrupt. Parents get letters home from these assessment results, correct or not? Do you get many calls, like, when you get a
No,
letter home
I
and
think
say
it's
you're below grade
overwhelming.
level, but that is-
Yeah. That is something that I know that we all need to work on. You send a graph home and you try to provide information to go along with it, but there needs to be much more intentionality around it as well.
So you don't get tons of calls saying, why is my kid below grade level?
They also get title letters, so if their student is getting an intervention, it gets labeled right to that. So here's your graph. This is what we're doing for your child because they are below where we want them to be, and this is the intervention we're providing for them. So it lays it out, so there really isn't a lot of question. It is, your graph is low, this is where you should be, here's where your dot is, and here's the paperwork saying what we're gonna do about it. So it's pretty self-explanatory, that people don't call a lot, but if they do have questions, they can always call.
I'll share a little bit around math for you guys. Overall, for the middle school, we had +3% for our growth, and it varied amongst our grade levels. Once again, we were very intentional around looking at our tier 2 interventions and what we had worked on with those students, the progress monitoring that went along with that, and making the adjustments the same as ELA. Right now, we are emphasizing the ELA side of things. So a couple things that went well and was a positive around that for our math. We have a big percentage of students that are proficient in both math and ELA. And for our win time, we really had those students utilizing with some of our math teachers some extension, a chance for them to move from proficient to college pathway. And this year, for our math students, we've had the largest number of students go from the proficiency to our college pathway. And I know that's not shown on there, but that is a huge celebration around kind of our tier 2 groups that we have students work in. One other thing that really kind of hit home with us tonight when Amy had talked about the data that's up there, each mark that's up there is really a student. And I think one thing that we've really done intentionally this time around, seeing our fall to winter growth, is take a look at those numbers and break it down to the actual students. And when we do that, we found out information like maybe we had 28 students that have grown from not proficient to the proficient, but then we had 14 that were right on the edge that had fallen back. And so on here, it's showing us that really we only made half the gain that we did with the intentionality around that tier 2 and tier 3 work. So that tells us a little bit that there is still tier 1 and universal that we need to work on. So we dove into that a little bit for math and working in the PLCs. I think one of the biggest things that we talked about and we want to really be intentional around is our math vocabulary. So a good example, and Amy had talked to about us about this as well, would be perimeter, for example. A lot of students could add up the 4 sides around a shape and get the perimeter. That's an easy task, an easy skill for them to do. But if they don't understand what the term perimeter means, then that's taking them right out. So making sure that we're intentional around our vocabulary, goal setting is huge. I think our math teams have done a phenomenal job utilizing the Dreambox growth reports. We know that not all students are coming to us at grade level, and that Dreambox has really been a big help in terms of differentiating lessons for all students and allowing us time to work in small groups as well. And we take a look at those during all of our PLCs and make sure that students are growing at the rate that they should be, and if not, what can we do to help those students grow within that universal instruction as well. One other thing that we found when looking at kind of the students that had dropped down from proficient to not proficient would have been attendance. Probably 50% of those students had missed more than 10% of the school year. Whether that be a doctor's excuse, family, a trip, a vacation, just ill. So I think our intentionality around attendance as a middle school as a whole, it is big and will make a big impact on this as well. So we've done a couple tier 1 incentives around attendance. And then also we have our tier 2 and tier 3 around attendance as well. And we're continuing to look at our tier 3 and try to expand that. What interventions can we really use with those students to make sure that we get them in front of the people who can make the difference and make those results change? Is there any other questions? All right, thank you. The high school, Clinton Matt.
Good afternoon. All right, we're going to start off with Mr. Morank. He's going to give a couple celebrations, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the data and interventions.
All right, so I have two celebrations to share with you tonight. First one is that we had tested 98% of our students at the high school for bachelor's testing in math and reading. And just to put that in perspective, before we were at about 78 to 80, low 80 percentiles. So to get 98% of our students tested was a huge accomplishment. Mr. Warninger, one of our coaches, was instrumental in helping with that. So very close to 100%, which is a pretty tough task, but we're happy with that. The other part we used with our FastBridge data is we were able to start pretty close to the truest intervention that we've ever had at the high school. We've never really had an opportunity or had the staffing to run a true intervention, and we started that this school year. And so we don't have really great data because it's so new, and myself, Mr. Rogers, Mrs. Stutching have met on how we can continue to increase that amount of time because we know it's needed at the high school. So it started, and we're going to continue to grow on that this year.
So Matt had mentioned interventions, and we're lacking interventions at the high school. As a system, we're getting students that are severely deficient in reading and math, and they need some special attention. So we're talking with central office and amongst ourselves on how we can get more of that at the high school in the future. Also, we want to help teachers understand this FastBridge data moving forward and have the students setting some goals around that, both to increase their skin in the game, so to speak, with staff and students in that FastBridge testing environment, and the credibility. Knowledge about that screener can increase the credibility with students and staff, and that's going to have an impact on their effort when they're taking that as well. Mr. Morank mentioned Mr. Waniger, and I'm going to bring up Mr. Waniger again because one of the things that has been a focus at the high school is disciplinary literacy. And that's one of the things that's going to help improve those scores. And I'm going to speak specifically to the 9th grade, where we have the only positive percentile change with Mr. Kanzila in history. And he is getting help from our coach, Mr. Waniger, in a coaching cycle that Mr. Waniger has done in there. And that's an example of disciplinary literacy. So it's writing and reading in all subject areas. And in that history class, they're creating an essay, but they're not just being asked to write the essay. They're being walked through step by step on how to do that, gathering evidence from different sources. And they've just gotten those essays back recently. They started reviewing that data today, and they are pleasantly surprised. I wouldn't say surprised, but in Jim's words, pleasantly pleased with the results that they're getting back on those essays. Also, our Phi Ed department, I had met with one of the members of the Phi Ed department today, and we talked about his SLO, which is all around creating summaries in Phi Ed. So he's having those students read articles, watch video clips on active lifestyles, and writing summaries on that. But then again, they're not just saying, write a summary on it. They're teaching them the aspects of writing a good summary. So that's where that disciplinary literacy comes into play. So I want to move down and talk a little bit about math, specifically around 9th grade math again, because that's one of our celebration areas. And that our algebra team, as far as our professional learning communities, is one of none, if not, I would say the strongest in the building in terms of looking at student data and making sure they're bringing back the students who aren't hitting the targets, and that is having an impact positively on those ninth grade scores. So moving forward, again, I'm gonna recap what we need to do is have some education around our FastBridge, as well as our ACT competencies, and then having each student set some specific goals around FastBridge, not just our students who aren't showing proficiency, but all of our students, in order to make that jump from winter to spring.
Do you guys use, the app Duolingo? I know it's something that the foreign languages sometimes use, but it also has the, other subject areas, math being one of them. I'm just wondering if that's something that would help, not only at the high school, but also at the middle school, because you can create what's, like a streak, and the kids really want to focus on keeping their streak going. And so it celebrates their wins, and then if they get something wrong, they can try it again. And I just think it's something that if you're not utilizing, maybe that would be something worth looking into.
We've only explored it at the world language classes at the high school. I know we use IXL for specific individualized work for math that they can grow in, but I haven't explored it for other subject areas.
Yeah, just check it out. I mean, it's helped some of the students that I know really well. They really like it a lot for other than their language.
Thank you.
Can you talk more about the students creating their own goals and what that would look like? I'm just putting myself in like a 16-year-old's mind, and I don't really care about the goals. Like, what does that look like for a student? How do we monitor their progress?
Well, along with looking at what typical growth is for a student in their scale score category, also we want to look at attaching some specifics to that goal setting. So if I can get out of the identified below grade level proficiency, maybe I would have some more flexibility moving forward into next year in terms of what I'm able to take classes wise. Otherwise, maybe I would need to look at some of those interventions that we were talking about earlier.
And I'll just add something that we can consistently look at and monitor, because we know that if students are coming back to their goal on a consistent basis, they're going to be more successful. If it's something that we put in place and then we don't review until the winter or spring, it's not really relevant to them. So if something we can come back to on a daily basis or a weekly basis, it's going to be more prevalent to them if we work harder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to wrap up, thank you for your time. I know it was a long kind of part of the school board meeting, but I hope you guys see and I hope the community sees that we are super intentional on every student who walks in our buildings now, that we are making sure that we are doing what's best for Antigo kids, and that will continue moving into spring and to next year. Any final questions?
I'd just like to point out my appreciation to all the buildings, your time with putting together the data and also intentionally sharing out and intentionally using the data. Especially excited to hear ownership that growth is great, but as adults, we know they're not proficient, and that's huge. So I appreciate that, and I think that's been a concern of the community too. So we're not just looking for growth. Growth is great, but we're looking for proficient and more than that too.
And you can't go up if you don't acknowledge where you are.
Yep.
Right? We're acknowledging where we are. We have plans to make it better. We're coming for #1 in the state. That is always our goal. So we have to keep making those steps to get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, you have the report on letter E, Director of Building and Grounds. Are there any questions for Mr. Leitman? Hearing no questions, we will move to item F, Superintendent Report, Mrs. Wojcinski.
What are you trying to do with the storm shelter?
So there's a grant opportunity that basically it's available to help communities better prepare for natural disasters. So this one specifically, thought would be that we could design a shelter into academic building, storage warehouse, athletic facility, whatever we need. We could use those dollars as long as we make a structure that withstands the criteria that they set. It's their FEMA, so they want to have storm shelters in every community that can withstand the storms that that community should or could potentially experience.
How many people is it supposed to hold?
It's a big equation based on the radius from where the building would be located and the number of people that reside in that radius. And it's an equation. But
And it was $1 million or something, is that what?
it could be multiple million.
So you're gonna make a gigantic indoor football stadium? Storm shelter?
Something. It was out there, so we're starting to put in, the beginning applications to eventually apply for it. We need to know what that end game is gonna be when we apply for it. Trying to find every dollar we can.
So it's supposed to survive tornadoes.
Yep, that would be one offer, it takes into account with, Antigo has had some historical flooding, so it takes into account that floodplain corridor through the middle of town, saying that, if that happens again, there may be displaced people. So it should house X number of people based on that. Put all these numbers into an equation, and it says, you should build X square feet for X dollars, here you go.
Do they give us, can you bring us to maintain it?
I don't believe so.
Yes.
You talk about, energy innovation grant, possibly provide some dollars for the window upgrade at the middle school. Middle school is, is that also considered a fallout shelter? I don't remember if that one has, well, and I know that one.
The middle school is not
It's not.
central offices.
Central office. But, okay, yeah. But the middle school is not.
What makes it a fallout shelter? That's so built so strong now.
I assume, I've not looked into this, but I assume it's because of the structure of the building that's below grade. That would be my assumption.
The walls have to be so thick, they have to be made of a certain material. Like I said, the doors have to be.
Structure below grade. We have several buildings around town.
I guess I just don't know what the low grade means, but
A basement.
Below ground. Below ground.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you're
Yes.
researching this or initiating this for dual purpose. I think it's wonderful.
Thanks, well, it's a collaborative effort. I mean, Angie is always finding things, sending them over to us at central office to look into.
Excellent.
As we have time.
Yeah. Yes, it's
They
Go through.
do take a lot of effort to apply for grants. It really does. It's really not my forte, but certainly doing what we can. The whole admin team really does help, Kelly from the finance side. Ms. Loginski helps us make sure that we're staying towards the end goal. So it is a collaborative effort on it.
Thanks, Jake. Letter F, superintendent report, Mrs. Wojcicki.
Okay, I will be brief. So one of the big things and the most recent, we met with Dr. Tim and Carla Bublotz to check in on our 100-day plan. And I find that we're a very driven, hardworking team. And one of the things that we fall short on is to stop and celebrate the wins that we've already had. So this helps us to refocus, celebrate the wins, and have a plan to get us through the end of the year. So we did that just this past week. Another big thing, in January, I met with some of the special education staff. As most of you know, we do not have all of our special education teacher positions filled, which puts a hardship on the rest of our special ed teaching staff. And they have a lot of paperwork with IEPs, so I met with them to brainstorm some ideas of things that we could do to attract and retain our current staff. So one of the things that was a quick fix was to allow them 2 half days a month where they work in district just on their IEP paperwork to help them get ahead of the game. And they were beyond excited with that notion. So I met with Mrs. Burkhan and Mrs. Verhagen, and Mrs. Verhagen is working out a plan to get subs scheduled to make sure that, for example, at high school, we can do 4 full days and it will cover all of the sped teachers to give them a half day to work on just their IEP paperwork. So we're really hopeful that we're going to get some positive feedback from that. And again, about Pride Night, but one thing I want to really point out is Ms. Stutzring's admin assistant, Janet Krivishine, has been working on getting us up and running for online registration, so we're not balancing 10 million sheets of paper every time we have a new family enroll in our district. And it was the first night for online registration with 4K, and it's an add-on expense that we've been paying for probably the last 3 years, about $7,000 a year, and we've never used it yet. So it went live and it worked well, so that's a big celebration. So everybody will be registering online come next year. Hallelujah. And then participating in building tours with Jake and some of the board members based off of our architect meeting presentation that we had the other night. And then the last thing is February 28th will be our next focus group. It's likely going to be at North Star. More to come on that. It will begin at 5 p.m.
That's open too.
And that's open to anyone and everyone in the community to come and talk about our school district.
Slender, you might want to redirect this question to one of your directors, but if we can't fill all our special education staffings, my memory on this is also hazy. Don't we have to spend more or the same amount on special education than we spent the year prior? Does that screw it up, or do we got to give these people bonuses or something? Is that the federal law or the state law? Or...
I think what JP's referring to is the maintenance of effort. So it is a balance, and Kelly and I are well aware of that, and we're working together on it. So, yeah. So in some of the cases, some paraprofessionals were hired to help support. They're not able to do the same thing a qualified case manager can do. So yes, I'm pretty sure what I think you're talking about, it's the maintenance of
So
effort.
if we fail to do that, what happens? Do we lose the money, or is that like
We will not fail. We don't fail, JD.
We will get you more information on the criteria for all of that. It's quite complex. But we can send that to you if that's something you're interested in. Work closely with DPI to ensure that maintenance of effort is met, and there are certain exceptions for maintenance of effort regarding many different things. So if you want to dig into that, you can reach out, or we can send that to the board or talk about it at one of the committees. But there are different criteria too.
And it's very complex.
I just wanted the Cliff Notes version. I didn't know if we just were going to get bonuses. Maybe they need bonuses. We got all this money that we have to spend, or we lose it.
Well, we don't.
Well, we don't plan on losing money. We plan on having a Fund 46 deposit at the end of the year.
Any other questions for Mrs. Wojcinski and the superintendent's report? Okay, moving on to item 4, consent agenda. Letter A, approval of agenda, minutes, and financial reports, requests for overnight travel, report of district retirements and resignations, and report of district new hires. I would be looking for a motion, please.
I move the board approve the agenda minutes from the January 15th, 2024 Board of Education meeting, February committee meeting minutes, district retirement and resignation report, report of district new hires, request for overnight travel, financial reports for December 2023, January and February 2024, consideration of current bills, checks number 7635 through 7773 in the amount of $127,165.17. ACH numbers 232400715 through 232400863 in the amount of $951,275.44, and wire transfers in the amount of $180,234.58 for a total of $1,258,675.19.
Motion has been made by Bobby. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I do not, thank you.
Any questions or discussion on the motion on the floor from any board member?
I would just like to share my appreciation to the two retirements, both with our district for 33 years. So thank you for your dedication to our district. That's incredible, and we're very appreciative.
Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Hearing no questions or comments, Dustin, if you will open up the vote. Voting device is now open. You are in favor of? You are against? Now's the time. Would anybody like to change the vote? The vote is now closed. Thank you, Dustin, and the motion carries. Moving on to item 5, board action. Letter A, consideration to approve removing policy 8760, student accident insurance policy. I will be looking for a motion, please.
I move the board to approve the removal of policy number 8760, student accident insurance.
Motion has been made by Jill. Would you like to speak to your motion?
This was on committee for February. Dave, is there anything you'd like to add or share?
Over the years, the school district provided the opportunity for an insurance plan that parents could sign up for, kids going out for sports, those kind of things, so that the child would be protected. What we found is that over the last, I believe it was 3 years,
Yes.
not one parent signed up for it. And the policy that we had in place is no longer available. So the recommendation was to remove this policy since no one was using it anyway.
Are there any questions on the motion on the floor or any discussion? Hearing no questions or discussion, the voting device is now open. If you are in favor of removing policy 8760, as the motion states. Would anybody like to change their vote? The vote is now closed. Thank you, Dustin, and the motion carries. That policy will be removed effective immediately. Letter B, consideration to approve the 2024-2025 school calendar. I would be looking for a motion, please.
I move the board to approve option number 1 of the 2024-2025 district calendar.
Motion has been made by Jill. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, so this was brought to committee, and there was a survey that was sent out on the calendar options, with option number 1 having the overwhelming support for the request, survey responses, sorry, which notably, a few things with that is the high school daily schedule would extend to 3:15. However, the calendar would allow for students to be released for summer before Memorial Day. And also 163 student days. For this year, we have 172. Does that sound right? So it was voted on a committee to bring to the full board to support the recommendation for option 1 for the school calendar for the upcoming school year.
Is there any discussion from board members or questions regarding the motion on the floor for option number 1?
I
just wanted to say that as a parent in the school district, I very much appreciated the survey being asked. And always having the choice, have input in that. So thank you for that.
Do you think all the students voted for less days of school?
We had a total of 625 people that participated, and you can see if you look at the first graph, the largest participation group was family members. So, yeah, we did get a lot of good feedback from families appreciating the opportunity. So,
What are we doing with the high school prime time stuff next year? Is that involved in this, or is that separate?
it's separate. Yeah, it's separate, and Ms. Stutzring has already been meeting with the high school staff, starting to work on the master schedules.
One thing with the high school though, that I think was noted in committee is that it was really important to the high school staff to keep the classes at 45 minutes. So although school day was extended, the feedback from staff regarding the length of the class time was a big consideration in the proposal.
Any other discussion on the motion on the floor around the 24-25 district calendar option 1? Hearing no discussion or questions, the voting device is now open. Would anybody like to change their vote? The vote is now closed. Thank you, Dustin, and the motion passes unanimously. Item letter C, consideration to approve the 2024-2025 Antigo Hockey Association contract. I would be looking for a motion.
I move the board to approve the City of Antigo and Unified School District contract in the amount of $13,000 for the use of the multi-purpose building for the hockey for the 2024-2025 season.
Motion has been made by Catherine. Would you like to speak to your motion, please? Any questions or discussion on the motion on the floor?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering what the cost of this contract has been in the past, if that's increased, decreased, same.
If I recall, Mr. Leideman, in the committee report, it did not increase this year. Or no, it did. Come to speak of that.
It historically has went up $500. That's his last 10 years for sure.
Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor?
Is it against WIA rules to sell beer and liquor during high school contests? Is that why this is in there?
I would assume that that would be a problem.
Yeah, it says that right in there. It says you cannot have that during concessions. And I was like, I could make a lot more money. I don't know.
I suppose the reason that's directly written there is because this is not an on-campus facility. It's a community facility that has the ability to have those beverages there.
So at one time we shared hockey, I don't remember the name of the arrangement with White Lake, possibly? Somebody remember?
Co-op.
Yeah.
Do we still do that, and do they share some of those costs at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna speak generally, because I don't know all the details, but, in talking through this with Tom Schofield in the past, when we co-op with, district, there is some sort of financial agreement that's drawn up between athletic departments to cover some of that cost. So I know that there is a fee. I don't know the details of how that's determined.
But currently for this coming year, there is no co-op happening with hockey.
It's,
There is, okay.
It's with Burnham.
with Burnham.
Okay.
So maybe they pay.
They do pay a fee. I don't know how it's structured or how it all gets filed.
Sure.
I think it's very much, but they're desperate for the kids, so.
Thank you.
Great questions. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing no questions or discussion, the voting device is now open to approve the contract for 2024-2025 Antigo Hockey Association. Would anybody like to change their vote? The vote is now closed. And the motion passes unanimously. Letter D, consideration to approve the Language Villages in Minnesota field trip. We'll be looking for a motion, please.
I move the board to approve the German field trip to Concordia Language Villages in Bemidji, Minnesota, April 18th through the April 21st, 2024.
Motion's been made by Jill. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, this also came to committee in Rauschitza. Yes. Not good with my German. Presented at committee. Notably, what I'd like to share is that this opportunity allows an authentic experience for students that may not be able to go on a German trip to Germany. So there's a lot of work done from the German department, and committee voted to bring it to the board for approval.
Any other questions or discussion on the motion on the floor?
I was just curious if this has been open to the other German class. Mr. Werdinger.
I have informed him of that, and I do send emails to him asking him to invite the other classes, German 3 classes too. So all students, freshmen through seniors, are invited to go to that.
And the other one as well, or is it just this one? The one going overseas?
The overseas is next year's juniors and seniors.
Okay, gotcha.
I do pass the information. I do not have a list of his class. Send the information directly to all of his classes or to his students. But I do give the information to him, and then I ask him to forward it on to the parents and students of all of his classes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, the voting device is now open. Would anybody like to change their vote? Voting device is now closed, and the motion carries unanimously. Letter E, consideration to approve the German field trip to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. I was trying to practice that. I just butchered it up. I'm looking for a motion.
I move the board to approve the German field trip to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein from June 10th through June 18th, 2025.
My son and daughter, who was in German class, is not very proud of me. Motion has been made by Jill. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, again, Rauschitza came to committee. A huge shout out to all the work that was done to get it to this point. Committee did vote to bring it to the board, obviously. The biggest notable, there's lots, but I think that I'd like to point out is the last trip that was taken to Germany was in 2017. So this is huge to bring this back again. The other thing that I'd point out too is the cost increase. It's been going up overall, and so there's been a lot of work to navigate costs and look at best options. So I'm very excited that it could come to the board for this vote.
Any other discussion or questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing no discussion or questions, the voting.
We just pronounced Liechtenstein the correct way for me.
Yes, please.
Liechtenstein.
And Nathaniel. Any other questions or discussion on the board? All right, the voting device is now open. Would anybody like to change their vote? The vote is now closed, and the motion carries. Letter F, consideration to approve the 2024 baseball diamond contract. I will be looking for a motion, please.
Move the board to approve the City of Antigo and Unified School District of Antigo contract in the amount of $1,900 for the use of ball fields for the 2024 season.
Motion's been made by Dr. Bargo. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Refer it back, but I think this is the one that stayed the same.
The cost of the
Yes,
contract.
the cost, so the contract has stayed the same.
Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? Hearing no questions or comments, the voting device is now open. Would anyone like to change their vote? The vote is now closed, and the motion passes unanimously. Letter G, consideration to approve the Unified School District of Antigo's portion of the Shepherd's Watch map for transportation. I will be looking for a motion, please.
I move the board to approve the portion of the Shepherd's Watch Christian Academy attendance boundary map that is within the Unified School District of Antigo attendance boundaries.
Motion has been made by Dr. Barco. Would you like to speak to your motion?
It's something we have to do based on DPI rules. So we need to approve.
Are there any questions regarding the motion on the floor? Discussion. Hearing no questions or discussion, the voting device is now open. Would anyone like to change their vote? The vote is now closed, and the vote passes. Letter H, report of donations. I will be looking for a motion, please.
I move the board to approve the following donations: $500 from Elsa McKenna for Aquatic Center and $200 from Covantage Credit Union for physical education.
Motion has been made by Jill. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you to the donors for thinking of the district and your financial contributions. It's appreciated.
Any other discussion or questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing no questions or discussion, your voting device is now open. Would anyone like to change their vote? The vote is now closed, and the motion carries. Thank you so much for your contributions. Item 6, new business. Letter A, Donovan Group presentation. I will turn it over to Mrs. Aginski, our district superintendent.
So Dustin has the slideshow up. Lori was going to join us virtually, but she is in the air flying the friendly skies. Her flight was delayed. So she is going to do a recorded presentation and send it to me, and I will send it out to all the board so that you can see it. And then we can also post it on the district website so that the community has access to it as well, since she couldn't be here.
Okay, with that information, item number 7, closed session. Consideration of a motion to adjourn into closed session pursuant to section 19.851 of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of considering deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. I will be looking for a motion, please.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Jill to go into closed session. Is there a second? Second's made by Angie. We will have a roll call vote to go into closed session. Michelle?
Tomatic Nelson,
Yes.
Kristen Mackmiller,
Yes.
Andy Mary, Angie Schreiber, Judy Schroeder,
Yes.
Catherine Solon,
Yes.
Sandra Day Bardo,
Yes.
Bobby Braun.
Yes.
I'm a yes too.
I'm sorry, Danny,
I'm a yes too.
I need to put you at the end.
Not sure if Angie's voice was heard, so can you one more time say?
That's not right.
Be recorded, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
First, you didn't have one more question.